So welcome everyone. To those of you who've been on these before, you know that we try to be pertinent and relevant. And this has really been on my heart. I think that day after the election, I reached out to Avis. I was like, Avis, come and talk to us and give us some insight. We need your help. And we was just fortunate that we were able to pull it together with two such dynamic women, diversity, thought leaders, and all that. So I just felt like it was more important to get together sooner, and later we won't have all the answers. We won't know everything that should happen or could happen, but better to talk about some things that may or may not be happening now. I mean, in a month, who knows what's going to happen. So I just wanted to take a short time to introduce the two guests on tonight. And kick it off. We'll have questions at the same time, but I want to welcome Avis Jones DeWeaver. She is a career reinvention strategist, diversity and inclusion consultant and author, international speaker, media commentator, based there in Woodbridge, Virginia. Avis has been on once before, and I could not remember what it was that we talked about, but I do know that it was something going on, and Avis was so eloquent and kind of giving us some words to ponder and think about, in addition to the topic that we were speaking about. So thank you, Avis, so much for agreeing to come on. You're always so insightful and always so poised. You tell people off in the nicest way. I don't always think they know they've been told off by you.
You're the second person to tell me that in like 2 days.
I want to hear that. I love
I think it takes them a minute. I think it takes them a minute to realize that you've just told them off. But I love it. You're so encouraging and empowering, and those who know me know that I'm always promoting and whatnot. And so Avis has a fabulous book. Of course, I should have had it sitting right next to me.
Okay, but I always do.
Okay, good. Thank you. Black Women Lead.
Yes.
Black Women Lead. Please get that book. Hopefully she's going to go back on tour after the first of the year. Yep. Please, if you have a chance to see her in person, I haven't even seen her in person, but I'm coming to DC. I am coming to DC. Please do that. Again, thank you, Avis, so much for coming on. In addition to Avis, we have the fabulous Polly Massey, who is a professional speaker, global culture strategist, leadership and career. I'll put diversity on there too, because I know she does that as well. And Polly is based in Atlanta, where I lived for many, many years. So I want to thank both of you ladies for coming on tonight, especially here's her book, The Art of Inclusion. So go get them both right away. Go get a Kindle tonight. You can download it tonight, both of them.
Absolutely.
So thank you, ladies, for coming on. I do want to just take a minute to acknowledge the passing of Gwen Ifill. I think it was today. I saw a picture of her early today, and I had just kind of sat down to catch my breath because it's been a full day. And I was watching whatever it is on PBS, their annual, or not annual, their evening news. And Judy Woodruff, who is the co-host there, she was stumbling over her words, and she was pausing. And I was like, what is happening to her? And she said, as with great regret, we have to tell you. And I was like, what is she about to say? And I was so shocked to hear that the wonderful Gwen Ifill has passed. Avis, you may have known Gwen. If you have any words that you would like to share about Gwen, we certainly would welcome them.
Absolutely. Well, she was just a groundbreaker in terms of Black women in journalism. She was not only a regular on the PBS NewsHour, she also moderated the vice presidential debate between Joe Biden and Sarah Palin, you might recall, a while back. And so she's just been one of those women that we've all been very proud of. And you all might also know Cheryl Lynn Ifill, who is she is the president and CEO of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Those two are, I want to say, cousins. I mean, they're very closely related. So, it's just been an amazing family, and it's a huge loss to all of us in terms of her brilliance. So she will be greatly missed.
Yes. She has always been one of my favorites. I have a lot of friends in my head, and she's one of those. Yes. And sometimes when I had to go do a tough assignment or come back, she always gave me that, what I call master class in journalism. She was always so fair and so balanced. I already told Erica one of my favorite stories is that she started getting heat when she was moderating the debate to Sarah Palin, and they had the audacity to say she didn't seem, excited about it. Like they questioned that. And then right behind it, they questioned how she could be fair and partial with writing her book about Barack Obama. And she said, no one's ever questioned a white man when he was moderating a debate about whether he could be fair to other white men. And I was just jumping up and down. I already loved her. At that point, she was my woman crush. I was like, yes, yes, yes. And I think she just had that presence. They listened. Mm-hmm. Even when they didn't want to, they listened. So God bless her. I tweeted earlier today that a shining star, there's another angel in heaven.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, I did a brief introduction. If you ladies want to tell a little bit about what you do, and we'll jump right into it. I mean, I keep this very informal, but, if you guys have, I guess I should ask some general questions and then leave it open to those of us who are joining us watching. Avis, you want to tell us a little bit about what you do there in DC?
Well, as you mentioned, leadership strategist, I work with companies around diversity training and consulting. I also do coaching and individual and group coaching, particularly geared towards Black women and women of color in terms of career achievement. But as it relates to the subject tonight, my professional training has actually been in politics. I spent many years as a policy research advocate. And so I've spent a number of years in the policy space, and part of what I do in terms of a consulting firm that I have outside of my personal professional development work is I still work with clients in the policy advocacy space. So I write reports on Black women's needs in that sphere and still work in that space. And so pretty well versed in what something like this means in terms of the whole political fallout from a huge shift like this, and what we can do on the national and local level in order to make sure that our voices are still heard.
Okay. Awesome. Polly, you want to tell us a little bit about what you do there in Atlanta and around the country and world, I guess?
So quite a few intersectionalities as Avis, speaking, writing, delivering training and education for organizations, especially around strategy, around diversity and inclusion. So I call myself an inclusion and leadership strategist as well. And a lot of my early coaching was with white males who wanted to articulate their vision and message for their organizations around diversity and inclusion. I've morphed into doing more for African American women because they come up to me at the end of the session and ask about it. And it was one that I resisted for so long, but it's always been my calling because I was doing it for free anyway. And I'd say, I think I told you this, one of the gaps that I see in our area is the millennials actually having the education and the mentoring and the coaching and the sponsoring so they can get into this field. And, it's always that, do you have the experience? So one of my passions is helping millennials and even digital natives to start to prepare. What is it going to sound like? They may not have the same corporate careers that Avis and I may have had an opportunity to have. So how do they get into this space and articulate the need? Because of so many of my colleagues are baby boomers, have been doing this so long that I don't want us to have what I call the king gap, that we don't have successors, those folks that'll keep doing the work. So that's what I do. Yes, that's what I call it. And then I'm delighted to be here with Avis. Of course, I'm always a fan of the folks who've had the political acumen to bring that particular perspective, because so many times I'm always walking that safe line in the corporate space where you almost can barely whisper anything that has any tone of politics, but it's politics is what I eat, sleep, and breathe, and gather my thoughts when I'm watching myself learn and grow and stretch, because I'm a news junkie, and so I probably watched all of you all, from Gwen to you to Roland, and those folks who really say and understand what's not being said when we're in corporate.
Cool.
You know,
So thanks for having us.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all that you all do individually and collectively. So for me, you know, my group, Women in Science and Engineering, is focused, you know, primarily on, you know, corporate and, you know, to some extent, and academia, but the vast majority of the ladies in the group are certainly working in corporate positions. And has anyone heard anything about, you know, diversity teams, you know, taking I won't say a stand, that's too strong, but what are you guys, I'm thinking if I was still working a corporate job, especially here in Houston, where maybe some of the companies were less progressive, I would be both concerned about, you know, my position, especially if, you know, they thought they brought, you know, me in as a diversity hire. And, you know, moving forward, what is that going to look like? So if some of the government, you know, requirements for diversity or perceived diversity are going to be abolished with this new administration, I would be concerned. Are either one of you hearing anything, any rumblings like that?
You know, I haven't heard rumblings like that yet, but I don't think it's a far-fetched assumption. I mean, when you have what makes it so dangerous, what's just happened, is that, you know, theoretically, our country has a system of checks and balances. But with what just happened here last week, we now have the presidency, both houses of Congress, soon to be the Supreme Court, in 23 states in the nation, now led by one political party. And so that means that checks and balances are, in all practical purposes, completely out the window at this point. We can expect a huge shift, I believe, in priorities and enforcement of the laws that are on the books, and in just a specific new set of priorities that will be articulated. I'm particularly concerned that I call him he who shall not be named, but y'all know what I'm talking about.
Exactly. I'm with you.
I can't call him.
I would not say it. Listen, I'm not. DJT is the best I can do. And I lowercase it. I don't uppercase it when I type it.
There you go. See, what I'm most concerned about is he's just, unless I'm not going to mince words here, he has just said that he will appoint a known white supremacist as his chief policy advisor. And given that reality, the specific policy direction coming out of this White House, I don't think that we should be under any illusions that it's not going to be something that will be helpful for us. I mean, I really think that we're going to take a step backwards, unfortunately, in the short term. But that doesn't mean that there are things that we can do now to gear up to be able to grab power back in the next couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. In answer to your question, Erica, about have we heard, so I have some clients that I've had for a really long time. I've told you that. And so some of them have called and talked to me offline. Mm-hmm. One of them, we're starting an initiative to train 1,200 managers. So I just want you to know we're going forward. So whatever else happens, we're going forward. But I don't expect it's going to be like when you first started years ago, where we used to have some real issues. And so with that, all I could think about is that our numbers, African-American women are still the smallest group of folks in leadership positions. That's happened over the last 2 decades. And they didn't even understand how it happened. Right. I've listened to folks at a Lean In conference talk about how their numbers are growing and then kind of murmur, oh, but the African-American women is still, like less than 1%. And I just think that if it's that subtle and that unconscious, that, so they say, that it will slip. But I think that more than anything else, Donald Trump doesn't realize it yet, but he gave birth to a different level of movement. He thinks that he's going to change the way that he thinks he's going to change. I think we are woke up, as Malcolm said, not only wake up, but now we need to stay woke.
Absolutely.
We learned about Barry Goldwater, and I can remember my dad talking about it, and I had to go back and remember how much my dad used to talk about this stuff. To other people, sometimes it was too much, but it's embedded in me that we can never fall asleep. I have adult children. I'm not going to go to sleep. And with that, for me, we have to dig deeper. We have to speak up every time. We can't let little things slip anymore because we've made this much progress. We have to mention it every time it happens. It has to be a consistent, loud, glaring message that we are not going back. And so I think the real change has to come from us responding, not in a knee-jerk reaction, but in a real, focused, concentrated way to say that he is not going to take anything away from us. He's not going to take anything because we're woke. We're woke. And I think that's going to have to happen with our friends and our family, not just in corporate. Because I'm hearing private people, people who I thought I was on the same tribe with, saying that maybe we just need to be still and pray. That's not enough.
No.
It's not, and that's shocking to me. Or they're appalled that people are marching. That's shocking to me because you have your job because somebody marched.
Well, that's complacency, and I would love to hear your thoughts on, as part of the problem, with certainly minorities and Blacks in particular, is the complacency, right? We've gotten good jobs. We live in nice neighborhoods. We drive nice cars now. So, we're, a generation removed sometimes from the hood or from where our parents and grandparents grew up. And so, oh my gosh, that's terrible. I see those, young Black men being killed, but I live in a gated community, so it doesn't affect me, especially in corporate America. I mean, I can tell you stories with, people who, quote unquote, made it up the corporate ladder, and they've kicked the ladder away, not just because they didn't want to be identified, but they didn't want the perceived competition, I guess. They wanted to be the only magical Negro. So they felt like they had to do that in order to, retain their position in the workforce. So, any thoughts on that? What do you think about this? Or is it complacency? I'm calling it complacency. Maybe I'm too militant.
Well, do you remember the book, The Spook That Sat by the Door?
Oh, yes.
Book, right?
Yeah.
I think that that some of that has slipped in because we still like to brag. I'm the only one in my whole department. And it doesn't come with, like, they are not shocked or dismayed. They're saying it as a badge of honor. And I think it's time to get beyond that. If you're the only one, you should already be making moves to make room for somebody else.
We used to do that. I don't know when that transitioned, but we used to. Now, I'm not saying bring, people on board or jeopardize your career just because someone has the same amount of melanin that you do. But we used to do that. We used to say, well, I heard that they were hiring, and let me, reach out to the hiring manager and take your resume to that. Are we not doing that anymore, Avis?
I think it varies. I think it's, I do think generally speaking, it's probably less than it had been in the past, and it's very unfortunate. Here's my theory on this. I believe that one of the unfortunate unintended consequences of integration is that our cultural values have shifted to a cultural value system that had not previously been naturally ours. We were previously a very communal society where we did help one another. Obviously, under segregation, we had to. We were very mixed in terms of our socioeconomic status, having to live in close proximity to one another, and it built a stronger sense of community as a result of that. And I believe that one of the unintended consequences of integration is that as we then begin to migrate out and take on a broader culture that really values individualism over community building, that it creates a situation in which you're more likely to take on that attitude where it is more all about you instead of figuring out how you can help to bring that next person up with you. And the big shocker about that situation that ultimately will come to pass is, and I'm hoping that people will wake up now that this has happened. Hopefully people are woke at every level, because the big disadvantage is for that person who has that attitude is that when you're in trouble, who's there to help you?
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
You are completely on your own. So in the moment, you might feel like you're, king of the hill, but trust and believe if something happens to you, you don't have, people around you who frankly care about you enough to help you. And that would not be the case if you had made sure that you had those relationships and that you were fertilizing and nurturing and growing those relationships the entire time, that, of your tribe that would be there to help lift you up if something happened. And so when you're in situations like this is when you need that, right? And so hopefully we will begin to sort of rethink that value system and go back to this sense of it's not just all about me, it's all about us.
Absolutely, I agree. 100%.
I'm hoping that also, with the proliferation of these employee resource groups, which, have pluses and minuses, right? You can't be reliant on, a group sponsored and paid for by your employer, but, something good comes out of that. And, every company doesn't have that. So, the role of, I view Black organizations, whether they're, small and growing like BWISE or much larger, like, some of the other ones, Black MBA and things like that, is to provide that, that connection, that connectivity, so that you don't feel alone, right? I think that's what happens to a lot of us in corporate America when you don't have a soft place to land because you did not build these strategic relationships for whatever reason. And so, the first inkling of, strife at work, you've got no one to turn to. That's not how our grandparents made it this far. There was a community and people, if one person had something, everyone had something. And we work together. So I'm hoping you guys will get more speaking engagements at these corporate employee engagements so they can, because your corporation is not the government, right? So as leader of a corporation, of course, you've got mandatory requirements, I guess, for the government if you do business with the government. But hopefully, you take it upon yourself as a leader to do what's right. If you know your numbers are not right in diversity and inclusion, don't let this be an excuse to go backwards.
And well, there's that other piece that where sometimes there's a feeling of not being safe, Erica. People, that's what I hear when they're in a position of power and sometimes supposed influence. They don't really feel safe enough to advocate for other people because the other thing is how we live. We also embrace living so big and so much above our means that they're not safe enough to walk, to leave the job and go somewhere else because they're protecting. And sometimes there's this mistaken thing that folks are their friends at work. And everybody who's friendly to you ain't your friend. But there seems to, again, be that badge of honor, like, no, we're really friends. And it seems that you have to experience what we've experienced this time, getting shocked and find out, oh, they really weren't my friend. When it really came down to it, we understand that sponsoring and mentoring still is done 300 to 400% more for whites, for other whites, than it is for whites, for people of color. They just don't go automatically sponsoring formally or informally unless they have to. And the reality is that even then, that safety, I hear it again and again and again, after they do a certain amount of people of color, unless it's their job, they feel like they'll get labeled. So in the process, I just see so many people having to protect themselves, protect their family, protect their income, and they're not willing to go out on the limb to make that change. And I see it even with chief diversity officers, probably more than any other thing. So I'm going to go out on a limb, even if they're listening, that when they have the CEO's ear, sometimes that's when the least amount of change has gotten made. Because if you start to really think about the chief diversity officers, they become a part of the C-suite. And the whole goal of having the CEO's ear was to make that structural strategic change. But when you really started thinking about some of the organizations who made the greater change, it was the lawsuits, the class actions. It wasn't, it's not tied to a CDO.
That's right. Mm.
And sometimes the CDO is left. It's a career move, and it's just not making that kind of change. And so there's really a lot of shaking up that has to get done. So when you ask what's going to be different, it has to be someone who's willing to make waves. And like you say, you don't go bring butts off the seat, but that's what they've always thought about when we go get someone. Nobody ever questions that they bring in more and more people that look like them. But if you bring in someone who happens to look like you and has the qualifications, that you have to validate it differently than you do if they didn't look like you.
That's true. Mm-hmm. That's true. Do you think there's some value in partnering to have people in positions of authority advocate for this? I saw a study that said the only group that is not negatively impacted by promoting diversity are white males.
Right.
Right.
Sure. There was a skit, I can't remember who did it, and it was like, if you want something to get done, you tell a white person, and the white person goes and gets it done. You're really the initiator of it, but you just have them, tell it and share it, and they get it done. Do you think that? I mean, I know in my career, I have reached out to senior leaders because I was on a diversity team, and offered to mentor up instead of mentor down, so they can have kind of an ear, to.
Which is how I got started with the mentoring and the coaching up. Well, see, that white fragility thing is in there as well. You remember the video about white fragility, that it's almost like having to make sure they're okay, like when you always been okay.
Right. Right. So, why are we comforting you where you were the one who were injurious to us? That doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. So, Avis, what do you would you recommend that the people that you speak to, go out, because we're talking about individual as well as collective, and find that, I hate to say it, kindly non-minority person in order to be an advocate on their behalf, not just for career, but just in general. Polly has an event that she may want to share with us, and it was a white man who who spoke up on her behalf. Mm-hmm. So would you
yeah, I definitely think, generally speaking, it's a good strategy to make sure that you have people around you that don't look like you to help advance your interests. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's just a reality of the world that we live in.
You gotta have that white stakeholder.
Absolutely. They will have access to doors that you won't be able to get into oftentimes. And they will have that, as was mentioned previously, this sort of automatic assumption of legitimacy that unfortunately we typically don't have. We typically have to over-prove ourselves and over-legitimate our ideas. And so if you are in a position where you can find an ally whom you can work strategically with, particularly if you're looking to get big things done, I think that, generally speaking, that's a good strategy. It's unfortunate that that's a reality, but unfortunately, I just really think that is sort of a realistic understanding of the culture in which we live.
I agree. And don't send me comments, viewers, that, we're giving in to the establishment. You have to be strategic, right? Mm-hmm. It's fine, to say, oh, Black power, but you have to also be realistic and understand how business works and how things get done in this country. And they don't get done solely because Black people want them to get done. So we have to be realistic and understanding of that. So I do have a question from one of our valued viewers, actually, too. It says, how do we transform this wokeness into action? Not just action, but tangible action over the next 2 years. Have either of you all heard anyone talking about what, because honestly, we should have been planning for this. I'm an engineer, and most of the ladies on this call are science.
We should have known, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have that what if, did we?
Yeah.
I guess it never occurred to us, but I can tell you, if the engineers were in charge of the election, we would have had a contingency plan, because we just can't allow
I love it.
Don't forget that. If the engineers were in charge of the election, Hillary would have won.
This is true.
Because y'all would have gotten everything right.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So you can tell engineers and scientists were not involved in this election to great extent, but we would have had something. This is our fallback plan. In fact, I talked to a gentleman, at one of the large management consulting firms yesterday. So he said, now, if Hillary had won, it would have been, not a lot of change. We already kind of know what she probably would have done as far as her administration and compares to the current administration. But we also anticipated if Donald Trump by chance won, and that was going to be considerable change. And so they've already had things, put together, discussed about what they're going to do, what that does to their business. So there must be a lot of engineers over there at that company.
Yeah, they probably start selling their stock that first night, all kind of stuff. Yeah.
So are there some things that you guys have heard or that you think that we should be doing? I mean, maybe it is more collective. Maybe Black organizations need to come together. And as the founder of a Black organization, I don't say that lightly, because there are a lot of organizations that, in name promote diversity, but in actions, nothing ever gets done. So I don't mean to just come together and eat some, fried fish or whatever. I don't know. But, come together and to this comment, get something done. Have you guys heard of that? Do you have any recommendations of what, collectively and individually, what people can, because I think people are tuning in tonight and are those who weren't able to watch, but will watch, they're lost. I know I did not sleep well that night. And when I woke up that morning, I had a very heavy, in fact, I refused to get out of the bed. Wow. I just refused to pull the covers back.
A lot of us, one of the symptoms of our PTSD.
Yes.
That is definitely one. And then the grieving. We're in stages of grieving, whether people like it or not. And, some people may be able to jump up, but we're different. We're not all the same. But I would say that be willing to continue to keep the conversation going. I think sometimes we keep getting lulled back to it's better. And I read somewhere that someone said during the 8 years of President Obama, as phenomenal as some of us believe that he was, he's still a person and nobody's perfect, but that we got lulled into a complacency. And that we've arrived, question, because people ask me that in class. I know they ask you, Avis, so do you think this will work? Will we ever get there? And I always say no.
Yeah.
Because if we get there, then we'll stop working and then we'll have to learn this lesson again, because someone's always going to be different. Someone's always not going to be the way that you think they should be. And so the work is, to me, the journey is really about us being conscious, being woke, being conscious and intentional about how we treat one another and all of the different ways that we show up. And one of the folks that I see that really has an epiphany are white males who have special needs children.
Oh.
And I tell people this all the time. And so that's a conversation. They come up to me on the break at lunchtime and talk to me about their kid who has Asperger's, their kid, and now they're older and they're about to retire and they want to know their kid is going to live in a world that is going to take care of them and allow them to work a job that lets them take care of themselves when they're gone. And because there are more of them, and I tell people all the time, and that's where their awokeness comes from, because they're thinking about their kid who's getting treated like a second-class citizen in a world that's not friendly if you're not perfect. And when I'm listening to them, I have to learn to have empathy and listen and understand and be intentional and conscious about just hearing them, just hearing and understanding. So I don't know what all the things are. I know you've probably thought of some too, but I know that having that conversation with everyone, but not comparing. I don't want them to say having the special needs child is like being Black, because it's not.
Right.
But the feeling of aloneness and isolation and disenfranchisement, those feelings. I understand what that feels like, but for them to have had a special needs child to even be able to hear it and recognize that they still walk in privilege, because even within groups, there's still different privileges, whether I'm talking about deaf people or special needs children. So I just say we have to continue the conversation across all the intersectionalities and recognize that if you have these intersectionalities, that don't try to lump them all into one thing. Each one has its own experiences. And you could be gay and black, or black and special needs and female. And all of those have different things, and don't diminish those in the process. And I'm very hopeful that President Obama is a part of that national conversation when he's out of office, because I know he's not done.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Not in long shot. You know, I've a couple of different things, and I'm going to talk about this in two different ways. One in terms of the specific sort of work context that we're talking about tonight, but the other in terms of the broader political context. In terms of the work context, I actually had a webinar that I did scheduled for a client on Thursday after the election. And during the question and answer session, the question came up about how do we handle the work climate in the wake of this, which I think is a very real concern, because the reality is, 53% of white women and over 60%, I think it was about 63% of white men, voted for he who shall not be named, right? And so if anybody reads Harry Potter, you know what I'm talking about.
And maybe we should give him a symbol like Prince, right?
Well, not like Prince. More like the devil.
I'll just call him Voldemort. I'll make it quicker. Voldemort. Okay. So.
No, not like Prince. No.
Not like Prince, but a symbol that people recognize. When you see that symbol.
Yeah, I know. I just don't want his name and Prince's name.
Cheeto. Okay, we'll just use the Chester Cheeto, reference to his skin tone. But anyhow. So, the question was raised, and I think it's a very real question, because it's similar to what Polly was talking about a minute ago. You think you have these friendships with people, and you think you know them, and you think that they see you with a level of respect, and they're treating you, in a very humane way, and you're thinking that they like you, right? And the reality is, even if all of Trump's supporters are not racist, the reality is that all of them made the decision that it was okay to vote for a racist. I mean, let's just be very clear about that.
I just said that, yeah.
So that puts that whole dynamic, that whole relationship in a different context. When you're coming back into that office and you're looking at these people and you're wondering, are you one of those people who did that? And what part of what he did and said over the course of the past 2 years did you think was okay?
Were you willing to ignore? Yes.
Yes. And what part of that? And so all of it creates these very, obviously it's going to create a very tough environment to be in, a hostile environment. It adds to the trauma, as Polly was mentioning. And so I think it's a couple of different things that need to be done to address that. I think on the one hand, there needs to be those safe spaces where you can connect with people like you. For example, with the Black people in your office, and have these conversations and sort of build that sense of community. But I also think that it's important for organizations to realize that this is a real issue, and have an opportunity to have perhaps even moderated discussions across groups, so that it's not just this heavy feeling that remains in the air and that's never addressed, because it's not going to go away on its own. I have a training that I'll be doing in a couple of weeks, in which, we had already built in the fact that no matter which way this election went, given how divisive it was, that we were going to address this issue of how to move forward as a community within that organization post the election, given the situation that was riled up. And now, to be perfectly honest with you, it's going to be that much more difficult, because, we're not just talking about the results of the election and the fact that he has, his appointed white supremacists to advise him. We're also talking about the reality that all across the country, you're having these racist incidents occur. I just saw the other day a quantification of them. This not even a week post his election, over 200 incidents of hate crimes occurring across the United States, and many of them targeting women and children, happening in schools. So, you're targeting these people who are vulnerable. And so even you can't detach yourself from that when you're at work. If you're at work and you're wondering if your child is getting bullied at school because they're Black, because she's wearing a hijab, because he or she is being teased because they're Latino. I mean, if you can't really fully be yourself in that context if you're worried about what's happening there. So I think this is an issue that companies need to specifically address and not just assume it's going to go away on its own. So that's one thing. Politically, I will say that, so I was on a call tonight. I'll be in a pretty intense meeting tomorrow. Organizations are coming together and and looking to strategize. Black organizations are coming together and looking to strategize around moving forward and what to strategically do in the short term and in the long run and in the long term. There is sort of discussions about, people are going back and forth about the degree to which we're looking to sort of engage and at what level we engage with the transition team. But beyond that, one thing that I think is very important is that we need to, personally, I believe that we need to develop a strategy that's very similar to what the Tea Party developed when President Obama was first elected. And I don't agree with them, but I agree that their outcome was successful. And instead of hating, I believe in duplicating what works, right? And so clearly what worked with them was that they were able to pull together a number of candidates to run at the local level, at the state level, and ultimately infiltrated Congress. They were able to have these sort of outside actions. They were able to move the conversation to the right. They, to me, created the ground game that led to a Trump. And so the reality, I said it, darn, Voldemort. Okay, so, so to me, the thing is, I want to see a lot more of us running for political office at the local level, at the state level, at the congressional level, so that we can really get in there and start being the architects of our own destiny and not only rely on advocacy, but actually being more of those who are actually at the table writing the laws ourselves. And it might not be until, the midterm elections when we'll get to the sort of point, the level of representation that we sort of need to sort of start to stem the tide here, but the ground game for that starts right now.
I agree. I'm sitting here listening.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I love the idea of safe spaces.
I had a brilliant idea in my own mind anyway, is, one of the things that BWISE tries to do is empower those of us who are in corporate America and encourage those of us who feel like we've reached a certain level and can't go any higher, go into entrepreneurship. I love nail shops. I love, boutiques. But that's not where the billions of dollars are, right? If you are going to be a company that employs many, many people, you have to make many, many millions and billions. Yeah. Okay. So I'm hopeful that this will encourage some of my members or, just women in general to say, hey, you know what? I learned all this on my job and I'm going to become an entrepreneur, but not, like I said, not like we've seen in the past, right? Mm-hmm. We don't need any more limousine services. We don't need any more janitorial services. Can we have some semiconductor manufacturers? Can we have some compressor service companies? Can we have, and I love tech, tech is great, but tech represents just a small part of STEM. And I want to, make sure people understand that. That's really, robots are sexy and all that stuff, but who made the little chips and the little pieces that went into the robot? Somebody at a manufacturing facility. Mm-hmm. So I'm hopeful that, that one thing that, we start looking at entrepreneurships, because I think that has probably been a shortcoming, but also those of us who have gotten to a certain level, doesn't necessarily mean, age, but maybe, place in your life where you feel like you do want to give back and go into public office, public policy. I think that would be a great fit for some engineers to go in there and I was going to say something.
No pun intended, right?
Get some things straight if you let some engineers get into it.
But that's part of diversity too, is beginning to recognize who's missing from these teams.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if all the right brain thinkers who just love people are always in politics, but the strategic people aren't there, the team is incomplete. You don't have the whole brain of what we need in any organ. We teach that in organizations, and it's why it's so important, because passion will only get you so far.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Right. We got the passion. We got that. That's why I love the idea of what Ava said about safe spaces, because we all know that guys know that if they start talking about football, the black guys, they're assumed to be gathering differently than if the white guys are talking about football. Mm-hmm. Tone, tenor, everything is always believed different. If too many African-American women are gathering to talk about whatever, or if the Latino women are talking and they're speaking in Spanish, it's a problem than if the white women. And so safe spaces begins to get rid of even that notion that you get to ascertain when it's okay for us to have camaraderie. Right. Or to see an ERG is not an integral part of the structural dismantling of the isms at work, and that it really is helping you change the organization for the better. So that's why I love it. The work climate is definitely going to change, because the work climate was never 100% inclusive anyway.
Absolutely.
That's
I mean, we got to start with the truth. It was never inclusive. And so that's why it's even so important, because there are people who think because Jose works in the mailroom and Lakeisha works upstairs in tech, that they have diversity. So why are we even doing this work? So we still get that question in 2016.
Right.
I believe it.
We still get that question. So the reality is that, and you can't recycle people of color and then you're done. So the safe space means that the conversation continues, discussion, and maybe we have to import that to schools. Because I had a friend who multicultural, her daughter, and the father is black, but her daughter came home, and it's a northern part of the exurbs here in Atlanta, and was crying because she said the kids teased her and told her she's going to be a slave. Mm. Like that day, that Wednesday, yeah, you want to go fight somebody, right? Like, and so when you start to think about the structure that Ava was talking about, it has to be intentional. And people get weary. They talk about being diversity where you can't even get weary. I keep saying we can never stop talking about this. It's like lest we forget, as the ancestor says. You have to keep talking about it, and then do something, of course, with the safe spaces, with the conversation, and allow the ideas that bubble up to really take form. Because the real fear that I'm hearing is white folks are worried that they are becoming the minority.
Oh, yeah. That is exactly that.
Well, they are. I mean,
they are, and they're worried that they're becoming the minority. That's what I mean. They're worried, and that's why I would agree with Van Jones. He said it's a white lash, and then they're trying to come for him. It's a white lash, and they're really angry about it, and then they always want to blame it on immigration. And then in class, I have to go through that whole thing about how many children did your grandmother have? They all raised their hand. 5, 6, 7, 8 children. How many did your mama have? 3 or 4. How many do you have? Now they got 2. You've made your own decisions about reducing the size of your family and how much of the pie. Immigration didn't do that. You reduced your family so you could get a bigger house and a couple of cars, and now it's somebody else's fault. So if you keep them out, but you come from immigrants.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right.
I read somewhere President Obama said we all were strangers. No, all of us weren't immigrants.
That's true.
Yeah. Some of our parents were either brought here or our ancestors were already here, and we weren't immigrants. And they don't get to ever do that. They just don't ever get that pass from that. So structurally, the other thing I would do, not only the conversation, but at a state, city, and a national level, that every elected official has to be held accountable for not just having a diversity liaison. I'm not talking about Omarosa. I just wanted to make sure I say that. That's not what we're talking about.
Wait a minute now, Polly, you're going to hurt her feelings.
Yes, and I want to do that because, yes, that sister. Oh, yes. Anyway.
That's a whole nother show.
Yeah, that is a whole nother conversation. Because a liaison eventually becomes a paid pimp.
Mm-hmm.
You know, really, that's what they become. They don't become a person who's exacting change. And I don't know if that's paid, but I just think grassroots. Tomorrow, PBS is actually doing a story on Black America, and they're talking about how, you know, America made the Panthers out. They didn't talk about all the good stuff. They only talked about, you know, the negativity and created that whole thing the same way they did with Donald Trump. They normalizing him now.
Yeah.
And he ain't normal. I said his name. Oh, DJT. But anyway, or he who should not be named. I'm going to start saying that, he who should not be named. I heard them say, how do we stay woke? And I was like, every day, the same way we build our businesses and our millionaire, every day, what is one thing that we can do? Every day, do something. Do something. Say something. Talk to somebody. Make a connection.
For those of you who are on LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn. And I've started noticing when people are just outrageously racist, that people are saying, I'm taking a screenshot and I'm reaching out to your company and I'm going to send this screenshot of what you said to your company, right? So I just encourage all of, you know, it may seem like you just have a small role in this, but, you know, one person can be an incredible change. So I just want to encourage all of you all who are in the good fight out there in corporate America land and academia land and government land, just to keep up the fight, stay woke, support each other. And I think that probably goes without saying, is we can't do any of this if we are acting independently. And I know, you know, the millennial generation probably thinks, you know, we don't really need to reach back and help previous generations. But, you know, that's not how we all survive. We didn't survive by being independent of each other. We survived by unifying and working together, encouraging, uplifting, empowering, just generally taking care of each other. So I've got one last question, because I want to promise these ladies that we won't keep them all night. We'll just have to have another show. If people are that engaged and think that they got a lot out of this, I would love to have you ladies back. I mean, my gosh, I can't believe the hour's already up. But I had one question. I know this is from our DC, our DMV director, and she wants to know, what do you think are some of their most effective arguments in support of diversity in STEM to give a white male leader? So if you were talking at one of your meetings and you were talking to, you know, it doesn't have to be a technical firm, but a company that hires people in STEM, since that's all the rage. We want to get all these little brown girls in these jobs that they may not like after 20 years, but okay, nevertheless. What would you say if you were speaking before, you know, some white leaderships about diversifying STEM? What would you give them as some advice in today's climate?
Well, you know, first of all, I'd say that the studies on this are just overwhelming. Diversity is good for business, right? It leads to greater innovation. It leads to just better end products. It leads to higher profits. I mean, it's just better when you have these different people with different types of experiences and different types of ways of looking at things and thinking about things and different levels of creativity. It leads to better outcomes. So it's good for you. Now, another reality is the fact that the nation is changing. I mean, as we are all here on this webinar this evening, the majority of babies born in America are babies of color. And so the, human capital from which we have to pick as employers is shifting in America. And so we're at a space where it really is about being able to make sure that you're able to reach into this human capital that's available and pull out a diversity of people. And you have to understand how to do that now, because as the time moves forward, you're going to have a more diverse pool to choose from. You need to know where to go. You need to develop those relationships. You need to understand from an authentic point of view, what are the consumers of today and tomorrow, those shifting consumers, what are their needs? What are their desires? How is that market going to change so that you're producing products that are actually going to be sold at the end of the day? So because of all of those things, diversity is something that you do not just because it's an altruistic thing to do, not because it's something that is just the morally right thing to do, which is, it is definitely the morally right thing to do, but even beyond that, just the dollars and cents notion of it, it is good for business. So it is a self-interested action when you are recruiting and retaining and leading to ascension opportunities, not just keeping people there to have them in one spot forever, but allowing them to actually ascend to leadership. Diversity at every level of the pipeline is absolutely essential to making sure that your business stands out and is successful today and in the future.
Absolutely. I can give you two specific examples. One of them is a premier jewelry company in the US. Another one is a beverage company. Neither one of them are going to reach their 2020 goals. They already know this because their marketplace has shifted and they don't have the pipeline already in place for leaders, multicultural leaders who can sell to the multicultural marketplace, who is no longer buying their products like they used to when they were household must-buys. And both of those, the only premier U.S.-founded jewelry company. So when we talk offline, I'll tell you more. And then I'm just saying, so it's 4 years from 2020, and they don't have the leader. So everything that Avis said, so they're not going to make the money. And then diversity is about excellence, because if your marketplace is demanding something and you can't create it, produce it, or know how to market and retain it because you didn't ever have the talent that had the wherewithal to recognize that whole segment of the market, then you've lost your competitive edge, not only domestically, but globally. Absolutely. And the rest of the world recognizes that as well. And they're possibly products for sure that we already know that are going to get created that they don't even know there's a need for until they have the talent to help them not only develop, sell, but to market that talent and to build a relationship with that marketplace. I think that that's the big gap again, is they want to stay in business. And they want to make money. And some of these companies have been in business over 100 years, Erica.
Absolutely.
And so they're stuck. And they think diversity is just butts and seats, and it's not. It's really not butts and seats because of the excellence that you already know. Our capacity to be multilingual, not just in language, but in culture and tenure and tone and our and ethnocentricity and all of those other areas that sometimes we can have conversations, or just the fact that when they recognize that with gender, that gender brought a whole nother level of excellence at work. And so you're not going to keep excellence if you keep doing the same things the same way. So when I think of those two companies, that the way that people drink beverages is not the same that they drank beverages for the last 100 years.
That's right.
And you're still struggling to do that. And the way that people are buying jewelry, even though it's premier, is not the same. We're moving into a different level of consciousness when it comes to that. And I think about the Dakota Access Pipeline, no matter how much they're fighting and how dog awful they're being to the natives that live in that area and ruin that water, there is some millennial, some digital native somewhere is already thinking of a way to make sure that we overcome that. They don't even know they're not going to know what hit them. When we don't even need whatever it is that you're shooting through the pipeline, because somebody else will come another way. And so it's the thinking. This generation is not being raised. The little kids, they're not being raised to think the way we do. They're taking more data in by the time they get to college than we've taken in a lifetime. So just what they know is going to help these businesses show up and do business differently, or who you want to do business with. I know there's a couple companies that I'm not doing business with anymore just because they're normalizing he who should not be named. Okay, well, I'm not buying your magazine. I'm not walking in your store because of how you pay, women and people of color, or don't pay them. And so as we start to make choices economically, they're going to but they still want our business, but they're not going to know how to not only get our business, but also retain that corporate citizenship that they've always had automatically in the past.
I hope this election, opens up the dialogue, and maybe some positive things could come out, because people may realize that maybe they weren't as inclusive as they thought they were based on some of the actions of, people in society and even at their own organization. So I hope something comes out of it. But regardless of whether it does or not, we need to stay woke, and we need to be as how can I say this? Just as prolific, is that a word? I don't know what my word is, but just like the millennials are revolutionizing so many things, I think, minorities need to look at that too. And that's one of the reasons why one of the tasks of BWISE is to encourage and bring new technologies that I think we should be aware of and part of. We've done introduction to coding schools, because I think if that's where the digital society is going to require that everybody needs coding, regardless of whether you're a coder or not, then let's get those basic skills so we know what they're talking about. We've got some upcoming things, and we had our last webinar on drone technology. Let's get into that. Artificial intelligence. Some of these things are not, just on the cusp of blowing up and making, a new generation of millionaires and billionaires. That's going to be critical. Artificial intelligence, drone technology, all these things, they're going to need people to overcome unconscious bias that non-minorities won't understand and won't be able to program into their equipment, their tools and things like that. So please, everyone, I encourage you, read what you can regarding how to stay up on this digital revolution, especially those of us who are scientists and engineers, probably a little closer to it than, the average citizen. And as the lady said, just stay woke. Just stay woke. I think if I could say it in one word, just do that, and you'd probably be making progress. So with that, I'll let you guys each have one last, comment for the group, and then we'll wrap it on up for the night. So, Avis, if you want to leave one last comment for us about this election, about what we should do next, what would you say?
If ever there was a time to lift as we climb, that time is now. The next couple of years are going to be a challenge, and we need to be able to be there for one another and have each other's backs. And I'll just reiterate your suggestion about looking at opportunities for starting a business in some capacity, even if you're doing something on the side right now. I think if you can do something to bring in another source of revenue, I don't think that's a bad idea. We'll see what will happen in the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Polly?
But I believe we will rise again, no matter what, because that's who we are. We're resilient. And that to teach the children right now about the importance of who they are, and that they have influence and they have power, so that they don't grow up disenfranchised. We don't want to take any steps backwards. So every chance you get, even when you don't see the eye to eye with somebody, that heart to heart, we teach the children wherever we are in those daily activities how important and how essential they are, so that when we're gone, and tell them the stories. Don't think the stories are too old. Tell them all of the stories. Tell them everything about what we've done, how we got over. Our grandparents, share the pictures and the greatness of who we are, because that's the thing that's going to give them the impetus to keep rising, that no matter what happens, that the goal should not be to live in the white neighborhood and go to the white school just to say that you were there. The goal should be to rise.
Love it.
As you climb.
Wow. That's powerful. I don't know a better way to end than that. And I'll just say thank you to our fabulous guest. I don't think I could have picked two more fabulous women who are also members of BWISE. So I thank you guys for your ongoing support of BWISE. I couldn't do this without the support of both my members and those like you who come on and share your knowledge. Thank you again. We could probably go on for another hour if I weren't about to pass out from exhaustion, but I want to thank you.
Girl, it's early where you are. It's 9 o'clock where we are. If I'm in your area, just quickly, the Washington Regional Association of Grant Makers has been putting racism on the table all year. So I get to do the closing session with one of my colleagues, and it's only open to African Americans. Who knew? This has been booked for 2 months.
Wow.
And it's about how to respond to discounting and racism. And we're actually doing a session in December. So I'm going to make sure I make some time if you're around so we can sit down and have tea. But is it, and when I start thinking about it, it's like somebody knew that we were going to need this, but it was already on the schedule.
They probably were engineers, I bet you.
I'll send you. But I don't know, but that's what we're talking about. And
y'all had a formula. She said that must have been engineers. I was saying they had a formula and figured it out.
Yeah, they did. They had a formula, but I'll make sure I send the link. And I say that to say because we need to do more of those.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's going to be one of those safe spaces that we're talking about. So it's already on the agenda. And I'd love to know if you're doing something in my area too. And Erica, thank you so much for your commitment. I love I have to tell you, you have the engineer thinker face. That was so serious, doesn't it?
Yeah. I'm working on my resting bitchy face.
Oh no, it's okay. No, that's who you are. No, I love it because you said you already have some ideas. You probably already got some structural stuff for us. So no, I love it. You be you.
Okay. I'm empowered. I'm going to be me. Yeah, ladies, thank you again. My viewers, thank you for always supporting what we do at BWISE and joining us. Thank you for your wonderful questions and comments. I'm hopeful and I'm positive that everyone got something out of this 1 hour or so talk. I always want our talks to be very conversational, like you're sitting right across from somebody and just having a good conversation. So hopefully we were able to do that for you tonight. And of course, I mean, I don't know what to say about these two ladies. I hope we can, further this conversation, have part 2. What should we do next? Or maybe we need to check in a year or a couple months and see what happened. Were some of these things implemented that we came up with? Somebody should listen to our ideas and start making this happen. Yes. So again, I want to thank you all. And
we got work
if you guys, you have work to do. Yeah, if you guys are interested in learning more about either one of the ladies, please get their books. They are on my website. If you cannot remember what their names are, go to the website and go to the bookstore. Avis's book is How Exceptional Black Women Lead. Avis, you want to hold your book up one more time? Can you hear me, Avis?
Yep.
She got it up.
Okay. And Polly, The Art of Inclusion.
Yeah, and yes, absolutely. But I have been holding back from writing the real book. The tough book is on the way.
Okay.
Yeah, like telling the truth.
Tell the truth. So please go out and support these ladies. These ladies are doing phenomenal work on our behalf, and we don't even know it. So go and support them and get some valuable information for yourselves as well. So with that, I will say good night. Thank you all again.
Good night.
Thank you, Polly. Thank you, Avis.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, ladies.